All right, guys. Well, welcome to day one of this particular experiment in our history videos. So I asked you guys to come up with some things for us to look at and research while we were kind of stuck at home. And one of the first things that came up is today is St. Patty's Day. Yay! So on Instagram, Miss Campbell recommended that we take a look at the brief history of Ireland. Now, like I said in my little intro, this is a very shortened version. There's no way I could fit the entire history of one country into a short video. So be aware, there's always more to the story, and I'm going to do my best for you, but this was just kind of a little bit of an afternoon of research for me, finding some of the cool things so you can get an idea of what the history of Ireland looks a little bit like and why we celebrate St. Patty's Day, like so many of us are doing today, even if it looks a little bit different than normal years. So when you think of Ireland, you might think of, beautiful green rolling hills and leprechauns and Irish dancers and even maybe potatoes. Look, it's Massa Potato. We know him. But there is much, much more to the story. So I'm excited to share my research with you. So let's see a little bit about what I found. As always, it's important for us to have context. When is this happening? What time period? What continent? What geographic limitations are we looking at? So we are looking at right around starting at about 3000 BC, although we see earlier human bones in Ireland dating way before that to about 12,000 BC. In about 3000 BC is when we start seeing some beautiful stone monuments being built. Now, we are in the continent of Europe. Here we are. So remember, this is the same continent. If you take my class, that Greece is in, and then Mesopotamia is over here. Egypt's down here that way. And we've got the Mediterranean Sea right there. We are right up here, kind of right at the northwest corner. All right, and if we look at Ireland, our earliest settlements are going to be right around there in the Boyne Valley. And we have stone monuments there, like the one you see right here, that are older than the pyramids or Stonehenge. So these are large things that we still have lots of archaeological references for and that you can go visit today. So we know people had a really sophisticated society there, even if they were mostly nomads, hunters and gatherers, and some light farming that we see right at the beginning of the Neolithic stage. And we still have some beautiful bronze artwork that's left over in this era. So we're finding all sorts of archaeological evidence every day of the earliest people. Now, one thing we're going to see in Ireland is it's kind of the story of people coming in from outside, cultural diffusion, we know all about that, and seeing this mix of cultures and what happens when two or more cultures mix. So here's our little buddy. He is moving right along the timeline. We're looking at about 700 BC, right around. So we are moving really closer, or much closer, to modern day history. 700 BC is the early Greeks, the Egyptians, that late period for the Egyptians. And we have a group called the Celts, or Celtic, sometimes you hear it say Celtic, but Celtic, yeah, that are coming in from all over Europe. And they were nomadic tribes who spread and migrated all over Europe into what's now Spain, France, Italy, or not Italy, rather, Spain, France, and into England and Ireland by about 700 BC. Okay, and this is where we start seeing more settlements, and these are very kind of tribal-based societies. So we don't have one big central government yet, but several small towns and areas and kingdoms start to get set up. All right, and so you can see over here, some of the villages from this period of time, from the Celts, that we have archaeological evidence for. And so they're usually circular. We've got lots of stone, mound, and ditch, and of course, agriculture, farming. Okay, and by about this time, 150 BC, we see the Romans coming into England. Where's Rome? Coming into England, but they never quite make it to Ireland. But we have a lot of records from the Romans about these Celtic people in Ireland. Now, About 400 AD, even though the Romans never really invaded Ireland, we start to see some ideas from the Romans creeping along into Ireland. So here is our little buddy right here, about 400 AD. And this, one of the big ideas that really shaped Irish history was this idea of Christianity. Now, we haven't really talked much about Christianity in class other than to say that Judaism influenced it. And hopefully, when we get to the Romans, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the beliefs of Christianity. But by about 400 AD, we start to see it spreading all over Europe and coming up into these islands here. And one of the figures, the historical figures that's most responsible for spreading Christianity was the figure of St. Patrick's. Today is St. Patty's Day, of course. It's March 17th. And this is a holiday that actually celebrates his death. Okay, so the story of St. Patrick goes that he was not actually Irish. He was either Scottish or British. And when he was or Scottish or English, so he was from over here. And when he was a young man, about 16, he was kidnapped by Irish pirates from his home and taken to be a slave in Ireland. And he became a shepherd. So you'll often see him with kind of a shepherd's crook, okay? And this has a lot of ties to Christian and Jewish tradition because remember, David was a shepherd as well. And in the Christian religion, they often refer to Jesus as a shepherd looking after his flock. So he lived in Ireland for 6 years before escaping and returning to his family. And by this point, Christianity had spread to England, and so he became a Christian and then became a priest, a cleric, and then he decided he wanted to go back to Ireland to spread Christianity. And so we start to see him spreading Christianity all over and introducing kind of the ways of Christianity to the people in Ireland, because before that, the Celts and the earlier people in Ireland were polytheistic. Remember, that means they believed in lots of gods. So here comes Patrick with his monotheistic Christianity and spreads that all over. By the 600s AD, he had come to be revered or respected as a patron saint, somebody who could be prayed to, looked up to, and who was really a messenger for God. Now, by about 800 AD, Ireland was majority Christian. So here's a little buddy over here. Hello. And we see many, many monasteries. So monasteries are places where monks or nuns, people who have dedicated their life to their God, can go and pray and live a holy life, kind of secluded from everyone else. So there were a lot of these religious communities all over Ireland by right around 800 AD. And we still have remains of many of them today. They were beautiful stone churches and buildings, and they were kind of like touchstones of the community. And a lot of times they had all sorts of religious treasures there, things that would be worth quite a bit. Now, we also see around this time some invaders and people who are looking to settle from Norway and Sweden. You might know them as the Vikings. So the Vikings were looking for two things. One, more farmland, and two, lots of riches. And so we start to see raids on these monasteries in the right around 800 starting. And so we see the Vikings coming over and sometimes destroying the temples or destroying the churches and the monasteries, and sometimes even settling down. So if we see on this map, all of these red dots are places where the Vikings said, hey, this Ireland place is pretty cool. We want to settle down here. We want to farm here and raise our kids here. So again, we have another culture coming in, mixing together and kind of mishmashing all those traditions into something new. So they kind of came, invaded, and stayed. Now, in about the 1100s AD, Ireland looks a little bit like this. So if you look at our timeline, here's our little buddy right here, right around 1100 AD. And it's divided into all sorts of different little kingdoms. All right. Now, we know from world history this year. United we stand, divided we fall. And that when we have a divided area or a lot of people struggling for power, then this means that some other people are always going to be able to watch and kind of take advantage of that situation. So we have right around the 1100s, one of the kings of this little province right here, Leinster, he decides he's going to ask the King of England. So here is Ireland, and here is the King of England. Now, the King of England was actually not even from England. He was French. He's called Normans. This group is called Normans. And they had taken over all of England. And our king over here in Ireland said, hey, if I pay you lots of money, will you lend me some of your soldiers to come fight against some of these other kings that I am at war with? And so the Norman king said, sure, and he sent his soldiers over. But then they didn't leave, and they just kind of stayed and ended up taking over. The Normans ended up taking over by about 1300 a good chunk of Ireland, okay? So they kind of invited in these people who ended up taking over. So if we look at this map, doop-a-doop-a-doop, again, all of this tan is the area that now our Norman king controls, that the Irish kind of lost because this one king invited these soldiers in and didn't let them go. All right, so the Normans start to lose control after a plague, a disease, kind of swept through in about 1348, but they always had some little hand. And so in the 15 and 1600s, it looked a little bit like this. And so here we are, 1500s. The English king Henry VIII in the early 1500s decided he wanted to try to take a little bit of this power back. So he started settling plantations, sending soldiers and farmers over to parts of Ireland, especially Northern Ireland, to kind of take control. And they kicked the landowners that were there out. Now, during this time, there was also a kind of religious war going on where Henry had left the main Christian church at the time, the Catholic Church, and formed his own church. So when he brought his soldiers over, he also brought over his own religion. Over the next few hundred years, we see the English kind of bringing over their religion and the local Irish, who are still Catholic, kind of fighting against it. So we see kind of this constant rebellion back and forth. The British trying to take control, the Irish saying, no, we don't want control. And it really kind of shapes this very kind of struggling relationship between Ireland and now, in the 1840s and 50s, so our timeline buddy is moving again, we see a major problem prop up that really brings all of these to the forefront. When the English had moved in, they made the potato kind of the crop that the Irish were allowed to grow. And the potato was good because you can grow a lot of them in a small amount. But in 1847, a disease called the potato blight hit. And so the Irish farmers, 80% of the population, started starving to death because this was their main food. So there's a major starvation, and it leads to many people leaving Ireland and moving to places like the United States. So in this map, in 1850, it shows that here's the majority of the immigrants to the United States on the eastern seaboard are Irish. And I love this fact. More than 1/3 of the people that migrated to the United States between 1820 and 1860 were Irish. They were looking to leave behind the conflict, looking to leave behind the starvation. So we still during this time have little rebellions popping up and down. After World War I hits in the early 1900s, England starts to release a little bit of control to Ireland, and it ends up dividing Ireland into two countries. The southern part is Catholic and was independent. The northern part was still controlled by England and was Protestant, like the English were. And so for the last 100 years, there still have been many, not rebellions, but protests and even violence sometimes, trying to figure out this question of should Ireland be all one country or should they remain separated? This is something that even today people are still debating about. So this survey was just a year or so old, and they took a poll of people ages 18 to 44 in Ireland, um, and it's almost evenly split. About half, 48%, say they would like to leave England, the UK, and join the Republic of Ireland and become one united Ireland. About 38% say they want to stay with England. And then you have a good chunk that is undecided. They don't know for sure. So, this idea of who are the Irish and should they be all one people? Should they belong to England? Should they be separated? Is still a question we have today. Now, that is my whirlwind Irish tour, and it is so short, and I'm leaving so much out, and I'm so sorry. But tomorrow, I am going to choose from one of my list that I have going here that you guys have given me, and I will give our next completely incomplete history. And I'm kind of leaning towards the medieval period. That was Haley's suggestion, Haley from my 7th period class. Um, and that would be a lot of fun, but also so much. Oh, these videos are killing me. All right, guys, I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're healthy. Let me know if you need anything, and we will talk again soon. Bye, guys.